That's right.
Okay, so welcome everybody. This is the West Bath Trails Committee meeting. The three members of the committee are myself. My name is Helen Hudson, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Rob Webb, I'm the secretary, and Helen's the chair.
I'm Kayla Sarrett. I'm our vice chair.
Yeah, so I say we I motion we call the meeting to order.
I second.
Okay.
All in favor?
And the only old business we have is to submit the notes from the last meeting.
Yep.
The draft minutes.
And I have submitted them to the committee beforehand. Any questions? Any suggested changes? I move that they be approved as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay, and then on to our new business and why everybody's probably here tonight. This meeting is just kind of a mini version of a larger meeting that took place on May 2nd that included all three communities, Bath, Brunswick, and West Bath. Everybody was invited to attend. It had a pretty good attendance. I don't know what percentage was West Bath folks that were there, and that was sort of our committee's reasoning behind having this additional meeting was just to make sure anybody who had questions that lived here or had suggestions or ideas or concerns had a place to voice them, and so that we as a committee could be gathering that input from more people. Yeah, so just a tiny bit about the history and the purpose of this committee. We started this committee just a little over a year ago in May of 2025. And really after the suggestion and conversations with Tim, believe if you don't mind me introducing you, Tim. So Tim Blair was the chair of the Bike and Pedestrian Committee in Bath, and he brought it to my attention that we have Julie, who's a wonderful representative of our town at these A2K meetings, but there really wasn't any other representation. And so we thought it was a great idea to start a committee so that we could help Julie out and also be a channel to voice any of your concerns from this community. So our charge is really to just assist in the creation of the A2K trail. And also, just recently, we actually changed the committee name from the A2K committee to the Trails Committee, so we're kind of expanding, and our charge, we changed the wording so that we're definitely here to help with other trail development, other trail concerns, beyond just the A2K. So that's brand new for us. And then really to just help identify any and advance specific needs of this community. And that's really the mini purpose of this meeting tonight is not just the large scale input from all three communities. So I feel like they've been talking about this for a long time, but really what are the concerns that we have here and what can we do to address them? And yeah, so then I just want to give a chance of introduction for the other stakeholders present, especially Dakota here. We have Ruth Indrick from KELP also coming eventually, we think. But Dakota, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. My name is Dakota Hewlett. I am the Active Transportation Planner or State Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator at the Maine Department of Transportation. Been with Maine DOT for approaching 4 years now, working on a lot of things that deal with bicycle, pedestrian, and active transportation uses throughout the entire state. So that looks like, transportation planning studies, safety projects, funding of things, trails, sidewalks, intersections, bike lanes, working kind of as a liaison externally, doing things like this with communities and stakeholders, and Bicycle Coalition of Maine is folks I work with pretty regularly, and others, and then also kind of almost a liaison back internally as well, back to the department about things relating to these types of topics, transportation and safety, and kind of help convey people's thoughts and needs and desires and plans, community plans, regional plans, things like that, back into the department to see how we can incorporate some of those into the work that we do.
Awesome.
I got you.
want to say anything else? I know that you're no longer the chair of that committee, but.
No, I happen to be a volunteer on the A2K Stakeholder Committee, and I'm just really trying to be helpful and support all the communities that are doing this good work, and just, so I'm here to attend and see how this goes.
Awesome, thanks, Tim. And sorry to put you on the spot, Ruth, I know you just walked in, but we're just introducing the stakeholders that are here tonight, so if you don't mind just introducing who you are and how you're related to the project.
Sure. I'm Ruth Enbrick. I work at the Kennebec Land Trust, and we've been kind of helping support, kind of bring some communities forward for the trail for many years, working with the towns, and I've been talking with the towns about this project since like 2012. So kind of have more of that history of the trail, if there are any questions about that and where we're at now.
Awesome, thank you. And actually, that's the perfect segue into a brief history of just the project in general. And Dakota was going to just run us through that as a mini version of what you spoke about on May 2nd. And also, specifically after the brief history, a description of the 3 routes, and we can use the visual for that if you want.
Sure. So we're here to talk about the A2K trail, the Androscoggin to the Kennebec trail, which is kind of envisioned to connect from existing trail networks in Brunswick to Bath. There are other trail networks and planned trail connections, especially in the Brunswick side, north and south from there, but focused on this geographic area that you can see, if you can see through the sticky notes on there. This has kind of been a long-term project vision. Obviously, people in the room have been involved longer than I have with this, but it was planned to be a 10, 12, 14-foot wide paved bike and pedestrian trail to connect to these communities. So we're not necessarily talking about a dirt hiking trail or an ATV snowmobile trail. Talking, something that's paved and generally focused on people biking, walking, strollers, rollerblades, that type of trail use you might see elsewhere. In 2004, a study was done, feasibility study with the consultant group T.Y. Lin, I believe hired with support from Maine DOT and the communities to do an initial feasibility study that looked at 2 of the lines that you see on the map here, and did some community engagement, some technical analysis, and recommended that their preferred route from that study was Route 1, the middle one that you see here in blue. In all of the routes, really, we're talking a separated path from the roadways, so we're likely to be in a roadway corridor following along a roadway, but we're not talking just shoulders or bike lanes. We're talking a separated path that at its minimum would be like a 10-foot paved wide sidewalk essentially, with as much separation as we could get feasibly from the roadway, like a grass buffer or esplanade. In some areas, in some of these corridors, we can get further away from that particular roadway. So it's not on the road, but it's adjacent to the roadway corridors here. So that feasibility study in 2004 happened. The communities, especially Brunswick and Bath, have done a lot of work since then, building out some segments. I know Bath has built pathways around Congress, and started to implement some of the recommendations from that study in 2004. Also, in the meantime, the communities have tried a few times to seek funding through earmarks through the legislature or other funding through Maine DOT and other sources, kind of hit or miss throughout that time period until closer to now. In about 2024, I believe, Brunswick took lead to apply for some funding from us to design the Route 1 alignment of this path. We did award that funding, and then later DOT leadership said, hang on, let's look at doing another feasibility study. We determined that it's going to take probably a big discretionary grant or some kind of congressionally directed funding program to fund a project of this size and type, and we didn't feel that, at that point, about 20-year-old feasibility study was enough to kind of stand on and compete, with US DOT funding and discretionary grants at a national scale. And our previous commissioner, Bruce, also wanted to make sure that we had the right line on the map. A lot can change in 20 years. We wanted to make sure we were looking at land use and make sure we weren't missing anything. that had been built in that time. So we're here today with another study. We're actually using the same primary consultant on this. TY Lin is doing this study. Maine DOT holds that contract, and we're managing that as a kind of a within a contract that we have with the City of Bath in partnership to do a large transportation study in Bath. There was some funding available through that that let us kind of tack this in as a secondary add-on scope of work with TY Lin. And by being able to do that, we didn't have to use the funding that was applied for a couple of years ago that had a local match. So there's no local match in this study right now, which was kind of I guess a pretty beneficial side effect of having that Bath study going on at the same time and having the ability to, kind of tag on to the contract that we have with TY Lin there. So we kicked this off early in the year. The consultant team has been doing some background information, existing conditions analysis, things like that. And we did our first public engagement meeting on May 2nd in Brunswick at the Southern Maine campus. There we had, I think, almost 130 people in the room for that, which was a great turnout. I would say it probably was more than we expected, but it worked out fairly well. We had 6 different stations set up throughout the rooms, large room, with maps like this, and some stations had some other materials and things to help guide the conversation. We had people facilitating conversations about safety and design and trail access and connectivity and looking at these 3 routes and all of that. Yes?
So this meeting was in Brunswick, but it was about this section?
It was about the entire Brunswick to Bath corridor. So,
which might change from what we're trying to link to?
our endpoints are pretty solid, being the bike path in Brunswick that ends near Cook's Corner, and then connecting to the existing path somewhere on Congress Street in Bath. But we could end up with any one of these 3 different colored routes here on the map, or potentially some hybrid of combining them if that ever were to.
So that Brunswick meeting had people talking about the Brunswick to the West Bath line?
We were talking about the whole corridor on that. We just happened to be in Brunswick for the meeting, but we had folks invited from all 3 communities and beyond, and we just ended up hosting that one in Brunswick. So as the study progresses, we're going to have a decision point here after some additional technical analysis and summarization of the public engagement that we heard the first time, probably to put together like a decision matrix. So that has all 3 routes on it, and then it helps us lay out, pros and cons, cost and feasibility and permitting, and, different public factors that were good or bad about each route to help us make a decision with the municipalities involved, the primary study group, and we'll have kind of a preferred route after that decision-making matrix. And at that point, we'll come back to the public with another public meeting that's not scheduled yet. Could be in any of the 3 municipalities anywhere, and kind of just project back to the public. We heard you say this. We did this technical analysis, and we've landed on this as our preferred route. What do you say to that work? And then from there, move on. There will be additional work for the consultant team after that to do some more in-depth actual project scoping and analysis to look at what it would take to build the preferred route. Do some in-depth cost analysis, some light design work to see, how many culverts, what type of a bridge structure might we need in a couple of places, that type of thing to help us really be prepared to design something later on. Design would come later on. I can't guarantee it will come immediately. It will be, driven mostly by funding availability. But from the end of this study, there's, we could have maybe multiple phases in here too. There might be a 2 or 3 phase project to get end to end. It could be 1. Depends again mostly on funding. Design would take probably 3 years from beginning to advertising for construction bids, and then construction of a project like this. If we did it all in 1 phase, it would definitely be 2 full seasons. At least I would say, if it was smaller phases, that would be smaller. Yeah.
So another question. So in the analysis, is there weight given to proximity to commercial locations such that that would prioritize the route in terms of, say, funding, additional funding that, might come from businesses?
So the exact weight when we start to measure these routes up against each other and different factors isn't determined yet, but I think that is part of it, would be access to other public destinations and businesses along or near some of these corridors. Which it's gonna be kind of a this or that situation, I think, with many of these routes. One of these routes has more businesses, one of these routes has more residences, one of these routes is more separated from traffic. I think each of those routes has some pros and also some cons, so it'll be an interesting decision, I think. As far as funding, we don't use a lot of private funding at Maine DOT. Occasionally that can come into play, or could come into play with local match. Is more after how it would happen would be that, you know, the towns would be liable for putting up maybe 10% local match, but within their 10% there could be, you know, philanthropy, there could be business involvement or other community groups that help raise funding and things like that. So there definitely is some opportunity if we can link in some businesses or other interested stakeholders.
So that would be represented in the choicing matrix?
Yes, yep. Probably not necessarily related to funding, but just access of businesses. The same with, you know, housing residential areas or other parks or, you know, things like that.
Does anybody have any questions about the three routes? Is everybody pretty much understanding the differences between the three?
I haven't looked closely at them. Could you guys give us a really quick summary?
Yeah. So
This is the first I've seen.
yeah, there are three primary and almost only three on-road or road corridor routes that connect from one point to the other. So here on this is north, up here on the map, the northern route here in the yellowish gold color is Old Bath Road, Old Brunswick Road, I think, depending on what side of the road you're on. Thinking about that. So that's one of them. The one in the middle here is in and along the Route 1 right-of-way, Route 1, more of a highway type controlled access facility here in the middle in the blue, and then Bath Road, Brunswick Road on the south side is the green line. The only other corridor that is in here that is a transportation corridor, but we're not considering that in this study, is the Rockland Branch Rail Corridor. So that's that railroad that runs through the area as well. We have an active lease with a railroad operator on that, and are not considering that in this study for the trail route at this time.
So where does that option stand? So you're not investigating that?
We're not. No. We have an active lease with a railroad, and we're letting them operate.
So that's not an option at all at this point?
It's not. There are some state statutes that deal with state-owned rail corridors, what we can do with them, and how we can consider a non-rail use. And we're not allowed to consider a non-rail use while they're active. If it was an inactive rail corridor, there's a legislative process to go through, but we're not interested in even beginning that process while we have an active railroad operator. So that's the quick gist of it. There are some pros and cons to each of them in regards to trail experience and feasibility, as well as connectivity to different parts of the community.
Yellow looks like it goes to the least developed area, which is offhand very appealing.
It does in some ways. There's a lot of housing up in this area here toward Brunswick. But you're right, and we heard that at the public meeting as well, that a lot of folks want both a nice quiet trail experience, and they also want it to connect to businesses and neighborhoods at the same time. And I'm not sure that, unfortunately, one of these lines does everything. Other studies where we have more options, we can hit more of those boxes in one alignment, but this one's going to be a little bit tough in that I think feasibility and cost might play into this a lot, because none of these three routes, I think, achieves everything we heard from the public. So we'll have to weigh some of those things.
And is the West Bath Committee looking at all additional trails to connect to this?
That's now within our charge, so that would be something we're open to discussing and working on in the future, for sure.
If I can just add to that, so one of the 6 metrics and one of the 6 tables at the public meeting was connectivity. So it's connectivity, so members of the public, how do you connect to the trail, and what are you able to connect with or to? Maybe to the point you raised earlier about businesses. And as Dakota pointed out, some of them, like the Route 1 corridor, has little connectivity between the beginning and the end. But as a means of transportation from one end to the other, it's the most efficient. And as Helen just pointed out, as this committee, A2K, was looking at this project, we realized that beyond the east and the west end of this, in north and south of it, there are existing trails that we should be considering how best to connect this to those. And when I say best, most effectively for the members of the community. And I think that Dakota could point out, one of the stakeholders at the meeting talked about the trails that we're hoping to connect to beyond Bath to the east and Brunswick to the west. If you could just comment.
Yes, yep, so this portion of the state does also carry the envisioned route for what's called the East Coast Greenway, which is a kind of a bicycle, pedestrian, multimodal path envisioned to connect from Key West, Florida, all the way to Calais, Maine, and kind of connects into existing trail networks and many of our eastern states here in the U.S. along that route as it travels from Key West to Calais. So that does kind of connect through here and would probably realign the East Coast Greenway to this path, should this path be built and be a nice place to put the East Coast Greenway. East Coast Greenway and some other stakeholders are also working to get trail development up to Brunswick from places like Yarmouth and Freeport, and kind of inching up out of some of the trail development that's happened in Portland and Yarmouth as well. There is a rail corridor owned by the state of Maine that comes down from Augusta to Brunswick, right at the junction in Brunswick. That's called the Lower Road. If you've ever been on the Kennebec River Rail Trail between Gardner and Augusta, that rail trail follows that exact rail corridor. We went through that same legislative process I mentioned a few minutes ago, and that corridor is now approved to become an interim trail, a trail instead of railroad use over time.
So that's been abandoned by the railroad?
We own it, so it's not officially abandoned. We are kind of held by state statute to hold it for rail use in the future, so we can build what's called an interim trail on it. But if viable rail use were to represent itself, we would have to favor that rail use and allow the rail to come back. Similar to some federal rail banking or trail banking, if you've heard that term at all. But we have a state statute here in Maine that kind of serves that. But as far as railroad terms, it's not actually abandoned. We still own and maintain it, even though we don't have it leased to an operator.
I had a question. Do we know which side of the Route 1 corridor is north of Route 1, correct? That you're
Yes,
considering?
the 2004 study said
That's
north
what
of
it-
Route 1, and I would imagine that's probably what we're really looking at for this one as well.
And then do we know if it's north or south on the other two? It could be either.
At this point, we don't. Yeah, could be either. It could flip-flop once or twice if it needed to for right-of-way or feasibility
Okay.
concerns at all.
So that right of way on, say, Route 1, if it's north of Route 1, is that within, always within 100 feet of the Route 1?
I think most of them would be within 100 feet, yes. There's a spot somewhere along here, I think, where there was room to get further away from Route 1 a little bit, but generally it'll be fairly close to Route 1, kind of similar to the Androscoggin Bike Path portion that you have coming out of Brunswick. So you'll be able to see Route 1 traffic for probably most of that.
And that's all within existing state right-of-way?
Yes, for the most part, according to the 2004 study at least,
Okay, yeah.
they thought that we could do that all within the state right-of-way, or mostly within the
So
state.
that would essentially have pretty much the same grade as the road, the hills and such?
Yes, yep. There'd be a little bit of grade to work with there. I think there's a lot of ledge and rock in there that we'd have to deal with as well. Not dissimilar to some of the other routes. But,
No tunneling?
maybe not.
Maybe.
But, we'll see. Yep. And then that is a good constraint to point out. On the northern Old Bath Road route here, there's a rail trestle that crosses the road that's quite narrow. So that would be another technical feasibility constraint that our consultants are gonna have to pitch us some ideas on, whether that means we just find some way to share a narrower space with the roadway for 100 feet or less going under the road, or the railroad, excuse me, or, quick tunneling project under the railroad or something.
I just tried this historical question. It may not be part of the study, probably isn't at all at this point, but a couple of years ago I found out, and maybe people know this already, but there was a canal dug between the Kennebec and the Androscoggin with a concept of using the tides to float, and I just got that information from a farmer who was in North Bath, I believe. Does this ring a bell at all, Julie? No.
Yeah, that's the Peterson Canal, and so that goes, basically, the top of the old Bath Road where the New Meadows is, it would go, the canal was dug to connect from the New Meadows up to North Bath. I think the problem was tides are so different in terms of timing that it never actually worked for flowing water, but there is an old dug path through there.
So I understood that too, that it never worked even though they had hopes for it. But when I think about level grades or easy kind of grades, I think the canal would probably have tried to do that.
I think it also goes through a lot of wetland. It's kind of wetland the
Beautiful.
whole way.
And wet. Buggy.
That's interesting, I never heard of that. Any other questions or thoughts, preferences regarding one of these potential routes? Whether you like something about it or don't like something about it?
And actually, before people answer, I just want to underscore that when the second as yet unscheduled but planned meeting will be to announce the preferred path. And I guess at that point, additional information might be considered, but the presumption will be that that's going to be the path. So now is the time to both ask questions, but then provide input. We can provide it to this committee, but for the purpose of getting it to the consultants who are going to be generating the preference. And that in addition to a meeting like this, which again, there will be a second meeting, but that's when the decision is going to be announced. So there's a survey that can be filled out online where you can provide information, and I guess ask questions as well, but express your preference. So with that, express your preference or ask questions.
So I saw that survey, I think there's 4 questions or thereabouts.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's very short.
So it's pretty broad questions. I actually didn't know the names of the roads, which one was which on that survey, so
That's
that
why we're
stopped
here.
me. I want to ask you a question about the lowest, the green path crosses the New Meadows River, so there'll be an additional bridge or lane, you have to create another lane for that?
Great question. Each of those lines on the map are going to deal with that same problem, I think. But yes, we'd be probably considering a separate, like parallel, like prefabricated steel bike ped bridge. There's a similar prefabricated steel bridge right here where the existing path goes over the on-ramp that curls over the road. It might be something similar to that kind of dark rusty looking steel that you might see arch over. Obviously, this one is probably the shortest span lengthwise in total. The Route 1 water crossing here has like a little bit of a causeway, so the actual water crossing is fairly short. It might actually be a couple of huge culverts, or maybe it's a bridge, I can't remember. It's not a large span, but the causeway itself is quite narrow, so we're going to need the consultant to help us work through whether we can just build onto that causeway and kind of cantilever a separate kind of boardwalk or bridge structure there. And the Old Bath Road, the northern one, unfortunately, is probably the longest distance to get across the water, and that has practically a very new roadway bridge that has no extra width to it. So that one was on us. The consultant might still be thinking about that, whether there's opportunity for a separate but parallel trail bridge or some kind of cantilevered structure.
So the access to the green, well, access to any of them, but the green line would have many access points onto it somehow, and how would that be managed if you were coming from one side to the other and have to cross traffic, for example, or how would you
Yeah, so that would have more traditional roadway crossings for some of the side streets and maybe even some of the business entrances that are in that area that you might see for other sidewalk and trail networks. So, you know, using warning signs on the road, stop signs in the trail, or vice versa, maybe some enhanced kind of crossing measures like the rapid flashing beacons you might see in town where you push the button and yellow lights flash, those types of things to help make any necessary crossings safer. But you're right, that route probably does have the most smaller connections along it and local roads that spur off of it.
They'd have more than, say, the Blue Line, just by its nature, doesn't have that much potential for connectors.
Yep, correct. Just here at New Meadows Road, and then there is a Town of Brunswick parcel right in this area that's, I think there is some existing Parks and Rec type land use here, and then they have additional park development planned here, so it probably would be a great connection to that park as that develops also. And that could happen probably from either of these lines.
I saw a couple hands a minute ago, I don't know if you still had.
Yeah, I'm curious from the May 2nd meeting what the temperature of the room was, if there was a preferred route that kind of came up just from talking to people there.
It's hard to say, honestly. I think it's maybe even harder than I envisioned it. After hearing it, a lot of folks, have things that are important to them in regards to like trail experience. Like a lot of people, wanted to be as far from traffic as possible, didn't want to hear vehicles, didn't want to smell vehicle exhaust. And then some people wanted the most direct route or the most separate from road crossings and driveway crossings, like business crossings. And, like with this one, with some of the business access and stuff, you'd be kind of bumping up and down over a number of driveway crossings and things as you kind of roll along the trail. So there are a lot of pros and cons. I think it's actually fairly difficult. I haven't yet quantified that in any way with like counting the sticky notes or anything, but I think it will be fairly difficult. Some folks wanted it to be more scenic, some wanted it to be more direct or more, more along access to residential areas and businesses.
And if I could just add, and you, Dakota alluded to this earlier, but there are some people who, if you walked around on the 6 tables where this map was laid out, people had drawn lines from here to here. So the route would go from here to here, and then it would be a hybrid.
Well, after,
Or here to here, I think, right?
after the New Meadows, right?
Yeah, sorry, they were coming down one of them, and so some of the notions was to try to kind of get the best of both worlds, where you had some scenic, but you avoid the constriction problem at the trestle bridge that Dakota was mentioning earlier, and if you sort of minimize the amount of time on Route 1. But I just want to point out that these are rather than have a 1,000 different permutations, these are the 3 basic options, and at the meeting, people were suggesting hybrids.
Yeah. Which is possible. We haven't ruled out the possibility of a hybrid, but the only one that I see that would be a real possibility would be something that jumps between the lines on and along New Meadows Road. I'm not sure that there's a corridor other than that we've been made aware of yet that wouldn't include a lot of private land negotiation or utility negotiation.
How has the response to the survey been so far? Has there been a lot of people?
I don't remember off the top of my head. There's definitely been some good response.
Okay.
Yeah.
When was that survey published or made available?
Uh,
I only just saw it,
yeah, just after the May 2nd meeting.
it was.
Yeah.
When's it closing?
Let's see what this is. 2 more weeks, give or take. I don't have a hard date necessarily. It's just, if we could take additional comment really until right up before we start to make a decision about a preferred alignment. But it'd be nice if we could have most of that gathered here in the first part of June, so we could have the consultant focused on some of the more technical analysis and then come back and bring the technical analysis and the feedback that we heard from the public together and start to weigh them against each other.
Don't need to dominate here from the back in case other people have things they want.
No, I'm good.
But what happens in the winter? Is there plowing that happens?
So that would be kind of worked out between us and the municipalities over time. Likely as we get into like a design, an actual engineering and design phase for a project that we have a phase or a piece of it funded. We don't have a strong preference at this time. We've done trail projects that municipalities clear, snow from, like a sidewalk. We've done some that folks groom for cross-country skiing. We do some that are just kind of unused in the winter, and some that are used by snowmobile traffic in the winter. So I think, I don't think Maine DOT would push a preference on the municipalities, but if municipalities were interested in doing snow clearing on all or a portion of it, that would certainly be fine. I believe Brunswick does on the portion of the path there.
As a very uncoordinated person, I find that a big benefit to have somewhere plowed and flat to get outside in the winter, so.
And as far as maintenance goes, with projects like this, we don't have a problem being involved in funding and building, developing trails, but Maine DOT does not maintain any trails in the state of Maine. So we'll be looking to municipal partners to kind of build that partnership as we continue along this process. Same thing, in the existing towns, Brunswick is doing great maintenance on their segment that they've had for a long time, and Bath is doing the same there. As far as how that is structured, there are a lot of options. We have some trail networks in the state of Maine where maintenance jurisdiction just changes at the municipal jurisdiction line. So one town does it, and then the next town does it, the next town does it. There are some municipalities that have banded together to create interlocal entities, like the Eastern Trail Management District or the Kennebec River Rail Trail Board of Supervisors, it's called. So it's essentially where multiple towns come together and sign an agreement to create an entity amongst each other to for a purpose of maintaining and operating a trail in this case. And then they would kind of fund things together potentially, so they might each have like an annual due. Based on, it could be a flat fee, it could be based on, trail mileage per town, it could be based on population per town, it could be based on anything the towns agree to. And then use that fund to collectively maintain the trail and either purchase equipment or hire contractors or a little bit of both. There's some examples in Maine of slightly different models of how that works. And often also with municipal support and nonprofit support, like Friends of the A2K Trail type nonprofit entity is common. There's a Friends of the Kennebec River Rail Trail, and there's a nonprofit involved in the Eastern Trail, and many of the other ones to do more of the volunteer engagement and coordination and philanthropic fundraising, and they might do events like come walk the trail on Saturday, or come participate in our trail cleanup, or 5K, or whatever it might be.
Is there any parking associated with nodes, or is that part of the plan?
Yes, it'll be a little bit part of the plan, not a huge portion of it, but there will be just a nod from the consultant's work on if there is room in the public right-of-way for parking or trailhead type amenities in these routes. I don't think Maine DOT is going to be interested in purchasing right-of-way for anything beyond what might be needed for the trail itself for this project. But if there was a wide spot in the Route 1 corridor, for example, at New Meadows, or something, which there likely probably is with the interchange that's there, or other areas or areas that are already publicly held, like the park properties that Brunswick has might be able to serve as a kind of a trailhead access point where parking can be developed, and a kiosk, and benches, bike racks, that type of thing.
And another thing people mentioned when we were thinking was thinking about for West Bath that potentially the courthouse parking lot could be a good point where there's a lot of potential parking available. Might be an option depending on where the route goes.
Yep, and that's always a possibility as well. I've got another project up kind of in southwestern Maine with a municipality along a rail trail project, and we don't own any extra right-of-way or width to really provide parking in their town, which is unfortunate. but the town is potentially looking at, parcels that might be available on the market that are nearby that they can develop as a local park and trail access point.
I think those last 2 points are really, we're definitely moving kind of into the brainstorming section of our agenda of what particular things affect West Bath residents, both, even though it's pretty far down the line, the funding of the maintenance. Because I don't know exactly what the mileage is, and it's probably different for all those routes, of what is actually in West Bath. But just imagining if it was, the maintenance fees were based on mileage, that it would be quite difficult for West Bath, which is such a smaller community and a smaller budget, to sort of rally for those funds. So it's good to hear that there are some other potential ways to.
There's probably 4 or 5 miles in West Bath of this spectrum, most of it, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some options. Maine DOT doesn't do trail maintenance, but beyond that, we don't mind if there are other partnerships built to take care of that. That's probably why it's going to be super important to keep talking with Brunswick and Bath and keep them talking and keep everyone together to try to see the value of the project regionally as well. And as you mentioned much earlier on, businesses and other community assets and organizations. I know there are major players in these communities. There are institutions of higher education. There are other kind of stakeholder groups that may have a place.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about Phippsburg, when they come into Bath, so they could be part of a coalition, hopefully using the trails as well.
As far as trail maintenance goes, we can talk about this just a little bit if you're interested. The first 5 years is really, hopefully not much maintenance other than, vegetation management, mowing, and trimming any trees that might fall down or something that happens with that, or any unplanned damage or vandalism. After 5 years, you might start to see a little bit more, maintenance need, more intensive vegetation management, maybe some crack sealing over time, getting into that 5, 10, 15-year type of range, and other things that happen, signs that get toppled over, and all that kinds of crazy stuff.
Can any of that work be done with volunteers?
Yes.
It does have to have a professional kind of treatment.
Yep, whatever the municipalities and nonprofits involved agree to and build together as a coalition works. Volunteers are great. I think volunteers do most of the mowing and trimming along the Kennebec River Rail Trail and things like that. That's certainly possible. If I were to put a dollar to it, I would estimate a paved trail in Maine to do it, really good is probably $2,000 to $3,000 a mile on, per year. But that's pretty rough. That's not necessarily taking into account, whether you're, if you're using contract work, that might go up depending on what you're doing. If you're contracting someone to snowplow or snowblow, that might go up. If you're using a lot of volunteers, that might go down, especially in the first 5 years. That really might be less. But, that's generally
And I'll just point out that it is part of our charge to help figure out the maintenance plan after the trails.
And that's something that maybe DOT will, myself will be a lot more engaged in after this, as we get into a funded segment or project to do real engineering. We generally would not advertise an engineered project for construction bids until we had that maintenance partnership or agreement in place, so that we knew the contractor leaves on their last day, we've got to hand the keys over to whoever's taking it from there.
And then the access point that you made about potential access points and parking for, just so folks from West Bath have a way to get on to, well, I'm thinking about the Route 1 corridor in particular, as it's easier to get on the other ones. But then there would be a way to access the trail there. The Route 1 corridor.
Are there any other publicly held places, land trusts, anything in the West Bath area that you wouldn't assume we already know about. Where folks could access the trail or the trail would be adjacent to.
Is the grade school an option?
Where is that?
That's on the Meadows Road.
It's across the street from the courthouse,
Up
basically.
about 6 inches from where your finger is.
Yeah,
Okay.
down
Hmm.
further, yeah, closer to Route 1, but right
Okay.
about there.
Doesn't have a lot of parking.
Was that little bump on the Route 1 path, is that near the courthouse?
Yes, the courthouse is right here.
Extensive.
And that bump is just to get the trail out away from the ramps.
I see. I mean, the courthouse is the courthouse, and, you know, but carve off some spaces for parking or something like that. Maybe not.
We can ask.
Yeah, but yeah.
Any other comments or questions, concerns?
Well, what's the timeframe?
So we're hoping to have that second public meeting late summer, probably late July to August, I think, whatever my PowerPoint had on that. So late summer will be that decision point and that next public meeting. Then moving forward from there into the fall and winter is mostly just the consultant doing that extra technical analysis and cost estimation on the preferred route. And then from there, we hope to be done with this consultant effort in the spring of 2027, March, April, May, that timeline. And from there, we have a nice plan and we need to shop around for funding. Obviously, that will probably be the most challenging part of this whole thing, looking at what federal funding becomes available over the next handful of years or so. US DOT federal transportation dollars are all up for reauthorization via Congress. This coming fall, at the end of September, is when our current US DOT funding completely runs out. So we'll be up to Congress to, along with all the budget making that they're doing, or sometimes not doing, is to kind of reauthorize and redevelop what transportation funding looks like that comes through US DOT. So we don't have a good picture of that because all the programs that we know of that have various acronyms and sometimes the names have gotten build grants or raise grants. We don't know if those programs will exist after September 31st or if they will exist in the same way. Maybe they have different focuses, different eligibilities for projects, different project sizes, that type of thing. So we're in a little bit of a gray area when it comes to funding. Being honest, until we get through that reauthorization, it's probably, my personal opinion is that it's not going to happen this year. The House Committee on Transportation has some bill language out for that. I don't think that the Senate side is organized enough to get it done this year. So we may end up with some kind of continuing resolution, and obviously general federal shutdown will impact that as well. With that.
Is there any planning for toilet facilities or water access, like drinking water along the way?
We are not planning for that necessarily in the study itself, but if there are trailhead areas in municipalities who want to develop those, that can happen. We try not to build too many buildings at Maine DOT. We find that we're pretty okay with roads and stuff, but we're not very good with managing buildings. That's just not what we do. There are some out there that we built and are still managing, but generally something more that the municipal partners or others would build.
So the existing trail in Brunswick, did the town of Brunswick put in, do you know, the bathrooms and water?
Yes, yeah. Yep, as far as I know.
That was actually one of the 6 subject matter for the tables. That was one of them, amenities.
So the surveys that are out there, that's how you vote for
Yes, yep.
your choice, that's the voting mechanism?
Yeah, yep. That as well as, come up and write on this map if you want to, or send me an email later on if you've had a chance to coalesce your thoughts or anything like that. Send them to the committee, and the committee can take thoughts here over the course course of June and send me a memo or
You
something.
can make
if
a
prefer to
comment
do that.
right on the
Oh, yeah.
webpage
Yes,
also.
yep, we have a webpage for this project where the survey is linked. At the bottom of that page, there's also a comment function where you can leave a comment as well.
Is that the storyline?
Yes, the story map.
Story map.
Yep.
Yes, I have that link on our website as well.
Yep, good. And that should be live, hopefully, throughout the majority of this project, so folks can check it again. It currently has just the PowerPoint slides in there from the first meeting, but as we get to the second meeting, we might have some additional information, maybe new PowerPoint slides focused on, what we'll talk about next time, and maybe some of that other information about, here's what our preferred route is, and here are the top 5 things that led us to that, decision or something like that.
So is there a restriction on motorized vehicles?
Yes, yep.
Could you have an electric bike versus motorbike, or?
Yes, that generally will come down to state statute, but e-bikes in the state of Maine are defined into classes, 3 classes, class 1, 2, and 3 bikes, based on some of the features that those bikes have. Those are generally allowed. The municipalities, if they choose, may restrict from that further. Anything not defined by that, I've been calling like an unclassed e-bike or an e-moto. It is kind of a fairly strong emerging trend in the work that I do dealing with electric devices that are, probably much more higher powered than most of the e-bikes that you see. They look more like a dirt bike, that type of thing. Generally, we would not be intending for those to be used, but it's kind of a emerging thing nationwide, is these electric higher speed things.
It's still gonna hit the fan on that one.
Yep, it is. So, and not ATVs. And there may be some access control measures taken at some of the roadway crossings, like the use of steel bollards or gates that help both kind of make sure trail users understand there's a roadway crossing coming, as well as to keep folks who are lost in their car trying to turn around from the trail and other things like that.
How about animals? Like, would horses be allowed? And what about dogs and dogs on leash, or?
That probably we would leave up to the municipalities and folks who are, taking on a longer term operation of the trail. Horses, they could be. I don't know a lot of folks in the equestrian community that like to go on a long paved experience. If it was more of a gravel or dirt type trail experience, that might be different. Things like that. And dogs would be fully up to the municipalities if you institute some kind of rules regarding that, leash rules and others. I would imagine it wouldn't be very different than dogs in any other public park in these communities, but we'll leave that to local folks.
Okay, any other comments from the public? We're in the public comment section at the end of the agenda.
What's Thailand, Razor, and North Star?
That is our consultant team. So
Okay.
T.Y. Lin is like the prime consultant, the major consultant. We work with them quite a bit. They do traffic engineering, structural engineering, roadway stuff. I think they do some non-transportation engineering as well. And then the sub-consultants, Mitchell Razor is a landscape architect. So he's helping them with the public engagement. He helped run one of our stations at the meeting on May 2nd. And we'll do some kind of renderings and making some things in the report look nice, and help with determining what some of the trail amenities might be. North Star Planning is like a land use planning firm here in Maine, also a sub-consultant of T.Y. Lin, helping them look at any land use changes that have happened over time, and some other things like that. They have a smaller role.
So once the trail, God willing, gets built, where does ownership go? Does DOT bequeath it to the town? Is that town property? Is it
Yeah.
still DOT leased to the town?
Good question. So any part that is developed on state-owned transportation right-of-way, like, right, you know, in any of these corridors, will continue to be, you know, owned, the property underlying will continue to be owned by the state, and conveyed to the, the municipal partnership or interlocal entity or individual municipalities, via like a maintenance agreement that just says, hey, look, a trail, maintain it, please.
So kind of like a traffic light, like
Yes,
it's
yeah, similar to
state
that,
property,
yeah.
but
If there is any case in which we either acquire right-of-way, if we acquire right-of-way, Maine DOT does with this project, it's likely we'll treat it the same as that. It's probably less likely, but it's plausible that one or any of the municipalities could end up acquiring a sliver of right-of-way along like if there was a local road that was a town road, that needed another 4 feet of width or something. That happens from time to time with many of our sidewalk projects. That would probably be retained by the town. And there's a possibility for like an easement type situation here, but probably more rare. That would have probably only occurred if we had, for some feasibility reason, to go around a bunch of ledge or something to kind of duck up into one of these other properties or something like that.
We've talked about, like, one of the big changes since the original feasibility study was done and today is that Wing Farm in Bath is so much more developed. And so that they're, like, connecting at Congress Street doesn't make as much sense as if there's an opportunity to connect at Wing Farm. It kind of might be safer, and so that would involve likely some sort of easement over private property to figure out how to connect there.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other public comment before I close that? Okay. The only other business for our committee is our next meeting date. And I would like to propose either July 6th or the 13th, which are both Mondays in July.
Either works for me.
Yeah, we do time. So maybe the 6th? Okay, 5 o'clock?
5:15.
I can do either.
5:15 would be great.
So it's 5:15 on July 6th will be our next meeting date. And anybody is welcome to come to the next meeting as well. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A second? All in favor?